Hello everyone, this is Joyce Pellino Crane. I'm the editor of the Westford Eagle. To my left is reporter Lindsay O'Donnell, who also writes for the Westford Eagle. And to my right is Selectman Kelly Ross, who has been serving the town since 2008 and is running for his third term as selectman this season. The election is May 6th. Today is April 23rd. Kelly is running for one of two seats. Also running is Don Sirianni and Jim Jarvie. We are launching today a series of interviews with all three candidates, and Kelly is the first. So Kelly, I want to jump right in and start off by asking you, what do you think are the overarching issues of the town, for the town?
Okay, first let me thank you and Lindsay for talking to me today. I always enjoy getting the message out there. The overarching issue in town for me is always the budget. It's hard to do anything else if you don't get the budget right. Pretty much everything we need to do in town requires money. So first off, you have to get the budget right. Beyond that, we know we have a severe need in the center of town with the center of fire station, and we've talked about that at the past couple of town meetings. That was built 40 years ago for a call fire department. We now have paramedic service, we have a full-time fire department, and that building is just not adequate for today's department. And in general, we're having a study done on our buildings, determining the condition of our buildings and what needs to be done to bring those up to date. We have other things going on in town, like dealing with the deteriorating building at 12 North Main Street, and a very important thing we need to do. We're in a really strong financial position right now in town. A big reason for that is because our employees stepped up and took 2 years with no cost of living increase. That was huge. That got us through a really difficult time without losing services, without having layoffs. But we can't expect them to do that again. We need to address our employees' sacrifice there and make sure we can continue to retain and attract quality staff.
So Kelly, do you think that the town can be more transparent, and if so, how?
We've done a lot with transparency in recent years. I first got involved in town government before I even joined the finance committee. They were looking for a couple citizens to help them redesign their book to get that they mail to every household before town meeting to get more information out there. So I got involved in that because that was very interesting to me. And if you look at the finance committee report that goes out now, it's a very clear explanation of where our money comes from and where it goes to. But beyond that, since I've been a selectman, we've put a lot more online. We have an award-winning website with thousands of documents available to the public. All our selectmen meeting packets are online, so anyone following our meeting can see the materials we see. WestfordCAT here is televising many more meetings than had been televised in the past. So we're really trying to be very transparent. Selectmen email addresses and phone numbers are available on the website. But I think the issue that's brought this up, there's one specific issue. Other than that, I don't think there's anyone who would dispute our transparency. And with this one particular issue...
The issue of the fire chief?
That's correct.
Right.
There was a question of whether or not to release an employee's personnel performance records. And state law prohibits us from releasing personnel performance records. Our employees have a right to privacy, and I will not violate that right. It was the right thing to do to release what we released when we released it. There was a question about it. It went to the Attorney General's, the Secretary of State's office. They agreed with us on much of it, that it shouldn't be released. There were other elements that they felt should be released, and as soon as they gave us that determination, we released it. But we could go through that process being confident we never violated our employees' rights. If you put something out there that you shouldn't put out there, there's no taking it back. You can't ask people to unlook at it, and you're exposing the town potentially to a lawsuit. So I feel like we handled that in the best possible way, It might have taken longer than some people might have liked, but in the end, the proper information got out there.
Oh, I think it's important to give the background on that situation. And please help me out here. The fire chief retired last spring, last June, I believe it was. Fire Chief Richard Rochon. And there was some kind of a pending legal matter in the background. Am I correct in that?
Not exactly. It was last summer. The chief was interested in retiring. There was a proposal for a retirement package, and so we took a look at that. And the amount he was requesting in the end was an amount that we could afford. And in fact, it made financial sense for the town because we knew that when he retired, there would be a vacancy while we were searching for a new chief. And the money we saved from having that vacancy for a period of time more than paid for the $25,000 separation agreement called for. And additionally, there's ongoing savings because the people in place, the new chief and on down the line that replaced existing personnel make a lower salary, so there's savings there too. It's kind of similar to early retirement, more formal early retirement programs we have done for other employees that have allowed us to save money. But this was strictly a desire to retire. There was no, I'm not sure what legal situation you might be referring to, but there was nothing like that.
So I think one of the issues was that a consultant was hired and that there was that the 20, was there a $25,000
the
$25,000
fee? No, there was a consulting fee for that. We routinely will evaluate town departments and their performance and how to improve. And in this situation, the town manager thought it would be best to hire a consultant to do an evaluation of the department. So they looked at the consultant looked at a myriad of things about how to improve how the department operates, but intermixed with it was, as I mentioned, evaluations of personnel and their performance, and that's the information we simply can't release regardless of what it is. So the $25,000 was a separation amount given to Chief Rochon, and there was a cost of a few thousand for that management report. And we've used this consultant for many other departments and for employee training and manager training and that sort of thing, and we've had a good track record with that.
Okay, well, thank you, and I stand corrected on the legal matter. Apparently that was not an issue. Moving on, I would like to talk about the budget a little bit because last year there was a forecast for a multi-million-dollar deficit for the coming fiscal year, which we are now approaching on July 1st. And this year, that gap did not seem to even exist. There was no discussion of a budget deficit. So can you explain how you solved this hole in the budget so rapidly within a year after such dire predictions?
Okay. Yeah, and this is not unusual. I joined the Finance Committee in 2002, and things have worked this way since then, where very early in the budget cycle, we typically are showing a multi-million-dollar deficit. It usually is in the $2 to $4 million range. As we work through the cycle, that number comes down until at the end we end up with a balanced budget as we are required by law to have. The reason we show such a large deficit in the early going is that we assume worst-case scenarios for a large number of items. So we assume our health insurance will go up by a large percentage. We assume new growth in town will be less than what we might otherwise have guessed. We don't guess high on hotel and restaurant taxes. And there's just a number of things. State aid, well, in recent years we've forecast it being flat or even reduced because of the difficulty with the state environment. But then as we work through the cycle, we start getting real information instead of just guesses. And because we try to assume worst case, the real information is typically better than what we were put in the original projections, so that $2 to $4 million deficit works its way down to a much more manageable number, and then we are able to handle it from there.
So how much has new growth brought in for the town?
I think in the last year, it was a pretty good number. We had Cornerstone Square coming online, some new housing developments. Trying to think, but there were, I think, a couple of other significant significant building. Princeton Properties, that new 200-unit apartment building, is another one. We can't expect that to keep happening every year. That was an extraordinary year where everything came together and gave us a new growth number in excess of 1 million, like 1.1 or 1.2 million. That probably won't persist in the future, but it really helped out in a big way last year.
So kind of going off that, what fiscal policies are you hoping to promote in town that might be an improvement from what the board has done in the past?
Yeah, and this is something that I worked a lot on. You know, again, my background is finance committee, so the budget is always of great interest to me. And to put it very simply, the principle that guides me is revenue has to be greater than or equal to expenses. We can't allow our expenses to get larger than our revenue. There's no shortage of ideas, and great ideas, of things to spend money on, but there is a shortage of money, and so we have to set priorities to make sure revenue is in line with expenses. So this last year, I authored a budget policy directive, which was adopted by both the selectmen and the finance committee, that essentially put the rules in place to try to make sure that our expenses don't get ahead of our revenue. That talked about, you know, if we want to do something new and don't have the new revenue to pay for it, then we have to identify the old thing that we will eliminate so that it all works out in the end. It had a few points in this policy. I won't go through it in detail now, but the Finance Committee and Selectmen worked with me to come up with something that has worked really well to get our financial house in order.
So that's very interesting. Do you see the need anytime in the future for a Proposition 2.5 override?
I don't see the need for it, obviously, with this budget we just passed in March. I'm not anticipating it for next year because the projections put us in that same $2 or $3 or $4 million deficit that I'm sure we will be able to get down to a balanced budget by the time we get to the March 2015 town meeting. The only reason I could see an override happening in the short run would be if there were some desire to do a new enhancement in town that we didn't have the revenue for, and that there was some sort of demand in town for it. I don't know what that would be. I'm not anticipating it, but that would be the circumstance that I could see where it might come up. In the long run, you just don't know. We could have another severe recession in a few years, who knows? And so to me, on the revenue side, an override is always the last resort, but I think it's hard to work with other groups and other people if before you even get to the discussion, you rule something out. So I will never rule anything out, but I will say an override is always the last resort on the revenue side. And then on the expense side, for me, a layoff is always the last resort. Hopefully it never comes to either of those, but I can't predict the future.
Another big issue in town is Pan Am. There was a train derailment in February that led a lot of residents to be upset over communications with the railway company, Pan Am. So I was wondering, what steps would you take to promote a better relationship with Pan Am?
Pan Am has been a problem for us in terms of communication for a while now, even before this derailment happened. They have left trains idling in residential areas for long periods of time. That's very distressing to the people who live there. And so we've tried to talk to them about that. They've met with us. We don't always get a satisfactory response from them. But this derailment, it was not a great event. You know, you don't want a derailment of a train with hazardous materials near residents and near our water supply. But if there's any sort of silver lining I can identify in that, it's that it brought the issue of Pan Am and how they communicate with Westford in particular and towns in general when incidents like this happen. And it brought the severity of this communication problem to the level of our congresswomen, our senators, government officials at much higher levels than the town. And so we're hopeful that we can get some satisfaction in changing the rules Pan Am's been operating by. We have a couple of meetings coming up with Pan Am and with representatives of our senator and congresswomen and all, and hopefully we will get to a good result through that process.
Let's talk a little bit about development in town, because that's been a huge issue. It's the new growth has brought in new revenue, but it's a double-edged sword because we're seeing the business corridor, which is Route 110, becoming very developed. We lost 30 acres to Cornerstone Square a couple of years ago, and bear sightings have increased in the aftermath of that. I don't know if there's a direct correlation, but it appears there is. What are the solutions? We need the new growth, and yet some residents in town really dislike the overdevelopment of the business corridor.
Yeah, and you called it a double-edged sword. I think there might even be more edges than that. As you pointed out, it's a loss of open space. There's traffic, more traffic on the negative side. And another one, it also stresses our police and fire departments as calls from Cornerstone Square and other new development occurs. The positives, as you mentioned, are the revenue. That's helped us a lot. It's been a significant amount of new revenue, and it will be ongoing revenue. There's also, I think many residents have come to like the stores there. They like the new restaurants in town. I know people in Westford. I'm a software engineer. That was a hard-hit industry over the last 10 years or so, well, even more, 15 years or so. There are a lot of people in town who lost their jobs or had a significant impact to their job, but we've had some really good high-tech companies come to town, like Sinosure, Red Hat expanded, Sinosure expanded, UTC Aerospace moved into town, and so that's provided a lot of high-quality jobs to residents who really could use those jobs, so that's been a plus. We do our best to manage it. As you would well know, if you drive through that area, there's major construction going on, and that will happen for a while. But the idea is it will move traffic through the Minot's Corner area in a much better way, hopefully accommodating the increased traffic from the new development.
So Kelly, you've been on the board since 2008.
Yes.
So what are some of the current weaknesses on the Board of Selectmen, and what steps might you take to improve them?
Well, I would say a big weakness, and something the new Board of Selectmen will have to address after the election, is the loss of Valerie Wormel. Valerie was an experienced selectman. She'd had 3 terms on the board, and that was really beneficial to the board. And she volunteered. She was a very hard-working selectman. She spent a lot of her time not only doing the stuff you see on camera in a selectman meeting, but she was involved in a lot of committees, too many for me to try to name, just doing a lot of the research and a lot of the grunt work of what it takes to run this town. And so with her departing from the board, someone else will have to step up and fill the holes that are left behind. And if I am fortunate enough to be reelected on May 6th, I know some of that will fall on me to step up and fill in for what Valerie had been doing.
Well, let's just go with that a little bit further, because you have a full-time job, correct?
Actually, I have a part-time job.
Okay, so you have a little bit
So I
more
have a
time.
little more time.
Okay. So that was my question, is do you have the capacity, the time to step up and fill some of those services that Val had been fulfilling?
Yeah, and I hope to be able to do that. I'm a part-time employee. I work Tuesdays and Thursdays, so that day those 2 days are difficult for me. The town manager and other boards have done a great job our other departments that need selectmen during the day have done a great job trying to set things up on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for me so that I can be a participant. I love this stuff. I love being a selectman. I find this stuff endlessly fascinating. It's a lot of it's still new experiences to me that I've really enjoyed and I've grown personally from. And so I look forward to the opportunity to step in where Valerie is departing, filling in the hole she's leaving for my own personal growth as well as for the benefit of the town.
Well, we'll get back to that before the end of this session, but I do want to move on to bringing in, talking a little bit about the creation of the Hunting Policy Committee and the firearms philosophy in town. Can you address some of these issues? They were very hot and very explosive issues, no pun
So to
intended,
speak.
but explosive issues last year when there was some call by former Selectman Robert Jeffries for more of a gun control, device control policies. And now you're serving on the Hunting Policy
Yes.
Committee, so can you address your role in all of this?
Okay. First, with respect to firearms, Bob did have a proposal to change the firearms bylaw, and, excuse me, when he formulated that proposal into a specific town meeting article, one of the first things I did is I went and talked to Chief McEnany and asked...
Police Chief.
Yes, Police
Thomas
Chief Tom
McEnany.
yes.
Mhm.
And asked, what does this mean to you? And I got a very clear message from him that this would be extremely difficult to enforce, that he would, having a bylaw regulating firearms different from every other town anywhere would just create a lot of situations where people are passing through town unaware of the bylaw or just not expecting the situation, and that it would tie up his staff. He expected there would be lawsuits as a result, and that would tie up his staff going to the trials for those lawsuits. So I just came out of that thinking this simply is not workable. It just doesn't make sense, even before you get to the philosophical issue of whether or not you should even be looking at this stuff in the first place. So I came to the conclusion, if anything's going to be done, it needs to happen at a much higher level than Westford. It should be at the state level or even the federal level, and we should focus our Westford energy on Westford issues. With regard to the Hunting Policy Committee, we had a resident ask permission to hunt in Tadmuck Swamp, and that's kind of in between Chamberlain Road and Tadmuck Road. Residents in that area were extremely concerned. Even though it's called Tadmuck Swamp, it's not entirely swamp. There are trails through there, a lot of family neighborhoods, a lot of kids go through there. It's surrounded, there aren't any roads through there, so it's a place where you don't have to worry about cars, and so
I think it's over 100 acres.
yeah,
there.
it's quite large.
Yeah, it's large.
And so the residents, their kids go in there, they walk their dogs in there, they jog in there, and so they had a lot of concern about allowing hunting in a place that's also used for other recreational purposes. And so the selectmen decided we really needed to have a policy to make sure we have something that works for hunters, it works for the residents, people can feel safe, hunters can feel like they can enjoy their recreation and address issues they're concerned about. And there's a good mix of people on this Hunting Policy Committee. We're just in an investigation and education phase right now, so it's going to take a while. But I think it's the right way to approach it, including all stakeholders and trying to get to a good result that everyone can feel good about.
So what other experiences have you had in town that would make you a good leader?
As I mentioned, I was on the Finance Committee. I was chairman of the Finance Committee for 3 years. I've chaired a couple of other committees, like we had something called the Long Range Fiscal Policy Committee that looked at kind of putting a set of policies in place to guide us through some tough financial times. I was the chair of that. When we were leasing the Rodenbush buildings, we had a committee formed to evaluate the responses we got from people who wanted to lease those buildings, and I chaired that committee. I've obviously been on the Board of Selectmen and chaired that for a couple of years. So that's primarily where my leadership experience comes from.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about you. We only have a few minutes left. So I would love to know something about you that we don't know. Tell us something that people don't know about you. Yeah, anything.
Doesn't have to be town related. I love national parks. My wife Cindy and I have been to 35 of the 58 national parks, and we hope to get to all of them eventually. We hike a lot. We've hiked up the 3 tallest mountains in the 48 states. Enjoyed it tremendously. Last fall we went to North Dakota and hiked in the Badlands through there. Got in the middle of a large herd, maybe like 80 wild horses, right in the middle of it, up close. And that's just like one of the top 5 experiences of my life. I just really was awestruck by that. I think if I were born out there, I wouldn't be here.
Was it like a sea of horses that?
It was a sea of horses. They're in groups of like 8 to 10 horses, but the larger herd was like about 80 horses, and we were just there in the middle of them, and it was awesome.
Wow. So where's your next trip planned?
We don't really have one. Our dog, Wagner, is getting much older now, and so we don't like to leave her behind anymore when we go away. But we've been to Acadia National Park in Maine a couple times before, but we think in the fall we'll go there, and that's a dog-friendly park where we can bring Wag.
Okay, well, we just have just about a minute left, and what I want to do is give you this opportunity to tell voters in Westford what differentiates you from the other 2 candidates.
Thank you. And thank you for giving me this opportunity, and for the other candidates as well. I think anytime you can help to educate the public about their choices, it's a good thing. I would like to be selectman for another term because I deeply care about this town. I believe we are in a really good situation right now. We came through a really tough time. It took a lot of hard work. But we came out with something that's getting national recognition. We're identified by Money Magazine as the 11th best place to live in America. We've been recognized, our schools have been recognized by Boston Magazine and by Newsweek. We have an outstanding town staff. We need to make sure we can keep them here. We are addressing our capital needs. We are moving forward, headed in the right direction, and I would like the opportunity to continue to keep us headed in the right direction for another 3 years.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining Lindsay and I today. I just want to say thank you to the voters of Westford for the Westford Eagle. This is Joyce Pellino Crane, and have a great day.